Thanks. Hey, thanks for joining everyone, and welcome to the 9th day of the SSJS Bootcamp. And today's topic is consent management in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And we have the expert here, Lukas, with us to dive deep into the consent management and how it is all set up and what it means. So he has a wide experience in the Marketing Cloud, and I love all his blog posts that he has written and all the content that he has shared. So I'm so honored, and now, of course, we are all fortunate to have him join us and present. So this is the 9th session, and if you haven't attended any of the previous sessions, we have all those sessions recording and posted on the YouTube channel at the @MC Learning Camp. And we also have some parallel hands-on sessions going on for the SSJS. They're happening on Thursday, 8 a.m. So that comes up with a hands-on building, like on live, one of us will be building along with one other person guiding the process. So if you want to know the nitty-gritty of the SSJS, that's a good way to learn. So I encourage you all to sign up for those sessions as well and join to learn more about the SSJS. So we have many more sessions lined up for the hands-on sessions as well. And we have 3 more sessions in the SSJS Bootcamp. So we have some other advanced content coming up in the next 3 sessions. So make sure that you are registered. And any questions that you have during this session, post them in the chat so Lukas can answer at the end of the session. So I thank you once again, Lukas, for joining us today and sharing your insights. So with that, I will turn it over to you. Can you go ahead?
Yes, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for prioritizing this this Wednesday on listening to me. So first of all, a brief introduction to myself. So my name is Lukas. As the slide said, I'm a nerdy marketeer or a marketing nerd. I don't know which one comes first, but I have a technical background. Have been studying computer science. But recently, 15 years ago, I moved more towards the business side of things with focus on digital marketing technology. I've been through a few positions around in agencies and also Salesforce partners. And the last 6 years I spent as a marketing cloud architect and senior program architect at Salesforce. Now I'm managing a marketing cloud engineering team and architects in Maersk, which is a global logistics company. So I've been, around a lot of multi-cloud, single cloud implementations of Salesforce with focus on the European market. So I understand 87% of SSJS, and why this slide? Well, I know a lot of people out there, Gordon Nington, Gregory Gifford, and also Mateusz and Zuzanna Jelczynska. There are a lot of really fantastic technical people out there who are much more in depth on SSJS. I know 87 is still a high number, I think, but just to tell you, I'm very much focusing on how can we apply SSJS into a business context. So that's why I want to work and show you how we can work with consent management now. But this is then 96% is how much I bridge the actual, the big gap between the technology and business. I really see myself as the connecting, the missing link between business requirements, technical capabilities of specifically marketing cloud, and how can we use, code resources? How can we use all the other tools we have in marketing cloud to actually solve specific business needs? What will we be looking at today? So first of all, I already mentioned code resources. Maybe not everyone here is familiar with why code resources are so awesome. Then I'll have a talk about custom integrations, you might know all the standard APIs that we have in Marketing Cloud. You can actually build your own APIs. Then we'll move through to data model considerations for consent management. Which data extensions should you be using? And then some more stuff on subscribers list. I think it's a really important one when it comes to consent management. Not so much related to SSJS itself, but I'll let you know why it's important. Then SSJS, we'll look at some code, and I'll be explaining what my code does. Once we're done, there's a link to my blog in this slide deck, and you're more than welcome to visit it. And there is an article explaining the code, and there is a full set of, there's the full code you can just download and put into your own Marketing Cloud account. Additionally, I'll provide a package with all the data extensions that you can deploy yourself in Package Manager. So you don't have to actually create the data extensions. They'll be just created for you. And we'll finish off with, going through, what can you do in addition on top of what we have been through today to make this an even better solution. And again, raise your hands or just speak up if you have anything to ask, to share. I'll be happy to answer your questions as good as I can. So first of all, what are we looking at? Well, what I have built and what I really like building is a connection between. Did I say I was a cat person? Yes. So it's a connection between the Postman. You might know this tool for testing integration and APIs. The next step here is the code resource. Then we will have the data model, and at the very end we will have Journey Builder. Because as for me, any consent management, it often comes with the requirement of being able to do some real-time triggering of a journey or a transactional email. I'll also be looking at a double opt-in, which of course requires you to be able to send out a BOI email in real time. Code resources. What's that? Well, you might know Cloud Pages. I think we all do when we are working with Marketing Cloud. And probably when you have been created Cloud Pages, you saw that there is something called a code resource. Usually it's called something with JS or CSS or text. So a lot of people, have just been using it to put CSS style sheets and reference CSS from their Cloud Pages. But sorry, cat. And to reference this CSS or JavaScript from Cloud Pages. What I really like instead is to use this to create these custom APIs. A code resource can run server-side JavaScript, MScript exactly the same as a standard Cloud page, but it does not come with any pre-existing HTML. It doesn't have like body, start, HTML tag, and all that. Plus, it has limited caching time. You might know that when you build something on a Cloud page and you publish it, it can take, it feels like forever to actually update. So you'll be refreshing and seeing still the old Cloud page. From my experience, code resources are basically published instantly. And I think when we're talking about integrations, specifically if we are talking high volume integrations, code resources come with no cost. I've seen before people doing these custom integrations using Cloud pages. You can do that, but a Cloud page will cost you super message for each impression. So imagine you have 15 different APIs that are being called thousands of times a day. You're actually spending super messages, which you didn't have to if you were using a code resource. I'm not saying that this will be like this forever. Salesforce might say, hey, we want to change it. Now we're making code resources billable as well, but yeah, it's not something that is in the books right now. So a good thing to keep in mind, there are not many things today that are free. Luckily, code resources are still free. Next one, security. You might know that Marketing Cloud has an OAuth authentication for the standard code resource. Sorry, for the standard APIs. You have your ID and secret. You don't have it if you build these custom integrations. You can use what we have, like an X API key, which is a custom header. It can do a simple authentication, and this is what I'll be showing with you later today. Or you can do what I called OAuth-ish. It's a way of utilizing an API call within your code resource to validate that the token that you are receiving is actually valid. So the client that will call your code resources still needs to do an OAuth flow with ID and secret, receive a token from the standard authentication endpoint, and use this token to call your custom API. I will not go so much into details on this one. It's kind of beyond the scope of this SSJS discussion, but it's just to say you can have these two ways of securing your code resource when it comes to receiving these API calls and processing it. Any questions so far? Okay, so the data model that we will be looking at has 5 data extensions. The most important ones are context and consents. So context, that's where you have your main fields with the first name, last name, email address, subscriber key. And consents is a separate data extension. This is simply because I've decided that I want to support multiple consents per my contact. In my example here, I have the ability to have a consent per locale or per country. So I can sign up individually to Denmark, to India, to Sweden, and I'll have one consent record per country, all linking down to my contact subscriber key. Then I have sign up sources. This is a data extension that would be logging where did I sign up from, because we want to keep track of my sign up history. We will have the sign up log, which will actually capture the entire payload that we are receiving. And that's, I think, for me, it's a really invaluable kind of feature, because it allows you to be able to go back in time and see if you have experienced some problems with people who claim to have the incorrect consent or something else is wrong. You can actually look into the sign-up log and see, hey, I can see that you on the 15th submitted this payload from this page or from this application with these field values. That will make it easier for you to actually do some debugging compared to if you just had the data extension with context and consents. We can actually just see the most recent snapshot. And last but not least, we'll have a trigger config. I'll show you the data in it. It actually allows you to map whatever sign-up source we are having to a specific journey. So let's say we have 5 different campaign pages. We can configure that each of these 5 different campaign pages with forms on them will trigger 5 different journeys without having to do anything else in the code. We can do that configuration purely in the data extension. So these 5 data extensions are the ones that are standing behind all this functionality. All subscribers, yeah. You probably, I hope that everyone here knows all subscribers list and knows what is good for. It of course holds the current status of each individual subscriber. You can be active, you can be undeliverable, you can be held, you can be unsubscribed. But we are working with data extensions for consent management. So why should you also work with all subscribers? Well, first of all, if I unsubscribe in my consent model, then we still might have the status on my all subscribers to be active. So it kind of is showing some discrepancies. And more important, if I unsubscribe by just going to a custom form or custom preference sensor, I will not log an unsub event. So if I don't log unsub event, we are not being able to track what email communications have actually led to me unsubscribing, because that's not being tracked on a custom preference sensor. It serves as a master kill switch, meaning that normally when I need to send out an email, if I only work with data extensions, I will always need to refresh my audience and look at my contact and consent data model to see if this recipient is eligible for receiving these emails. But if I update all subscribers list for me as a subscriber and set my status to unsubscribed, well, then if I just do any kind of commercial send, so in the send classification, you need to pick commercial and not transactional, it will not send out, because every commercial send is safeguarded by the status on our subscribers list. So even though some of your colleagues are messing up and don't refresh an audience and send out to 15 people who should have been opted out but are not, if they are opted out in all subscribers, the email will not go out. It tells Sales Cloud about opt-outs. So if you log the unsubscribe and you have a multi-cloud setup, it will also set the do not email field to true on this contact or lead record. But in our case, we don't have a multi-cloud example, so we're only operating within a data model on Marketing Cloud. Last but not least, multiple signups. As I said, I have the ability to have multiple consents per one contact or per one subscriber key, which means that I can be opted in Sweden, but I can then be opted out in US. But I can only have one flag in all subscribers, meaning that if I log unsubscribe event on me opting out in one country, but not in another, I will not be able to send out any emails from that business unit, even though I have an opt-in for one country in my consent data extension. So all subscribers, it's good and it's bad. It's up to you to find out, do you want to use that log unsubscribe event functionality? If you just have, very simple setup with one consent on and off, do it by all means. But you really need to be aware it has some drawbacks. So it's time to code. So let me just find my application here. So what we are looking at right now is we have our code resource here. We have the standard headers, which is kind of what Salesforce recommends if you want to secure your cloud pages. And you have your concept block by ID here. And you ask, well, what's that? Well, I've learned that if you want to do some complex coding, it can be a very, very long code resource that you end up having, which means you can put a lot of your functions within a code snippet in Content Builder. And as you can see here, I have one function that's called sendout, one function that's called send double opt-in email, one function that's called logon sub event. So you can actually take these, you can actually take all of these functions and build your own library. So each time that you want to reuse this functionality in a different context, you don't need to paste the full function in here. You just declare this content block reference in your script and it becomes available. And I show you something, I'll show you later how it's working. What is important when you do that, if you do that, that you declare it in a separate script tag. So if I just, have one script tag and I want to reference this, it will not work. I need to close this tag if I open the next tag, and then I can reference the functions that are declared in this content block. Okay, cool. So far, so good. So back to my authentication. As you can see here, we have API key, which is a request header from my...
Sorry. Can you zoom in a bit? It's hard to see.
Yes, yeah, I can. Okay. Let me...
a little bit more.
Yeah, like
yeah,
this.
Thank you.
So if you look here, I have my get request header function, which is an X API key, which means that if I want to do a postman call, I need to have my header declared as X API key and the value over here. And this value needs to correspond to the value that I'm checking for over here. And let me just show you what happens if I don't send this value over. It will just say error, invalid or missing API key. So this is what I mentioned before. This is quite the easy way of having it secured, you can say. You need to know what API key you will have. Of course, it can be more complex than 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's at least a very simple way to make sure you don't just call this endpoint with arbitrary values and just keep pushing data into it. So that's the thing here. But back to the code. I'll then initiating all these data extensions that we will be using and receiving the post data from my post call and declaring it to be UTF-8, so I don't mess up any special characters. This JSON is then being parsed, and I'll get back to this later. If the API key is correct, I'm starting to declare all of the parts that are being received from my JSON. Down here, I start by looking in my contacts to see, can I identify records where the email address corresponds to what is in the payload? If I can, then I declare the contact ID, so my unique ID of this person, as the one from that record. So then I know it is a known individual. Otherwise, it's just a GUID. Then we have our sign-up source, which are just getting from the JSON. And here I'm building an update payload. So I'm just taking all of these fields from my JSON and checking if they are populated. Why am I checking this? Well, imagine I sent a payload where first name was populated, but the last name was blank. If I already existed in that data extension with my correct last name, which is Lunow, we would then overwrite this record with an empty last name. So this is just a safeguard to make sure that we only push fields and values that have a value. We can't fix conflicts, because if you have provided first name of John, but in the data extension, it says Jimmy. We are still operating. Here we're executing our update of that row. And this is an interesting one, because if the contact update is less than 1, that's number of rows affected by context rows update, we then know, okay, we didn't find the matching row, which means this is a new contact that we're adding with the GUID. And here we have some logging that we are sending back to as JSON, telling the contact has either been created with this contact ID or updated with this contact ID. Then the next part here is interesting, because this is where we are working with consents. And you can see here there's a difference. Up here, I was just looking for one field, which is email. Here I'm looking for 2 fields, which is contact ID and locale. So I might be existing in this data extension with my ID and locale DK for Denmark. If I am, then we know it's an existing one, then we're just doing the consent update. Otherwise, we do a consent create. So again, we generate a new ID for my consent, and then we're adding 1 row for that particular locale. And here it gets interesting, because see, if consents email, and let me just go back to the payload here. So my payload looks something like this. I have, all my standard, and I'm not sure I can zoom in on Postman. I just need to find out if I can. No, sorry, that will zoom out. Okay, that's better. So you can see these are my parameters. And down here, I have consents, which is a nested one. And here I'm setting, do I have an email consent, SMS consent, phone consent, and version. And version is an interesting one, because we might have different consent text on the sign-up page. And depending on which consent text we have, it might cover more or less, it can be more or less restrictive on what we're allowed to do with that consent. And here I have a flag that's called double opt-in required. It means that if I sign up with this payload here, it will say, well, you might have given us the email consent, but for this sign up to work, we need to ask you to confirm your double opt-in. So over here in the code, you can see if my email consent is valid, and the consent double opt-in required is either false or it's not even there, we can just send out a confirmation email. I'll get back to that later. Or we can send double opt-in email if I have an email consent and if double opt-in is required. Down here, we are logging. So first of all, we have our sign-up log, which basically takes the full payload that we have generated and puts in to this data extension with a timestamp and with a reference to that contact ID we either created or updated. And we have our source log, which tells us exactly, when did I sign up, from what source, from what locale, what consents did I provide in this sign up, from what URL. So this is basically it. It's quite simple. But if we go into these 2 different functions, we need to go into this concept block here. So the send out, it looks at the sign up source, which can be, for now, this is a sign up form. You can put anything down here. It looks up if the sign up source is part of our trigger config, and trigger config, it looks something like this. It tells us that if we have source sign up form for locale DK, we need to trigger in this business unit what trigger event that's called welcome one, and this is not a journey. So we need to find in our journey builder a transactional, or it can be a transactional journey, or transactional send, or a journey, which is called welcome one, and it's this one. So it's actually quite clever, because then you can easily map whatever you want to send from your payload. You can add another record saying, well, it's fine if you come from, sorry, I'm not clearing, let me just minimize this one. If you come from sign up form SE, which is for Sweden, we still create a trigger for this business unit, but we call it Welcome Sweden, and it is a journey. So why is journey? Well, let's get back to the code here. The journey is important because this is something we check here. The issue with is journey or not. If we want to trigger a transactional email like here, it is a different type of payload, and it's a different type of endpoint that we need to use. So for that matter, you can see if it's not a journey, so if it's a transactional send, we use /messaging/v1 email messages. But if it's a journey, we use /interaction/v1/events. And the payload is also, you can see, quite different. But again, it's quite easy to use this approach here. So if I'm successful in finding this this combination of source and locale in my trigger config, then I just fire this event. And this is, I think, quite elegant, because in some of these first versions of this code that I did, the data was actually kind of hard-coded. So I defined each field that we needed to pass on to the journey. But I figured out there is a function called delete. So what I'm doing here is basically I'm taking the payload that I'm receiving here, and I'm deleting basically all this that's called consents, meaning that I can send any type of content to my to this custom API endpoint, and it will basically proxy this without the consents onto my what's it called, journey. And you can see in my example over here, where we have another data extension, what's called, there's a field called whatever. So, but whatever is not defined anywhere in our code. But because I'm proxying it, whatever, let's call it, it's hello, or whatever, 2, 3, 4. So since I'm just proxying it, it will just allow whatever to go all the way through to that journey. So you can be very flexible and add as many fields as you want, provided that the first part of the JSON actually has the fields that you need for your actual consent management, which is defined by what we have highlighted here. Okay, so that's the actual trigger part. But then we also have send upload in email. So this one basically only requires a consent ID. So if we need to make sure that we have, sorry, before I start, I can see there's something in the chat. Zoom, please. Okay, I did. Sorry for not seeing that before. So if we look at the send upload in email, I only need the consent ID. because what will happen here is I look up the consent ID in my consents. Then I find which consent ID does it belong to, which locale, and then I find the email for that consent ID in my context data extension. Then I can use this information to trigger a double opt-in email to this recipient. And that will basically do following. It will send out an email with a reference to that consent ID. And how it works, it will then allow you to build an email with a dynamic URL holding this consent ID to a custom landing page, to a cloud page, or whatever else. And you will then be able to do what's it called? You'll be able to do you'll be able to confirm this double opt-in. I'll show you how it looks in a second when we will do some testing of our post data. And in the very end here, I have a log unsub event. So log unsub event, it requires some additional fields. It requires the subscriber key, job ID, list ID, page ID, and reason. And this is what will happen is if you call this function, it will set the status to unsubscribe. I'm not using this anywhere now, but I just put it here to illustrate what functionality do you need to have if you, as I discussed before in my slide, if you want to make sure that you log unsubscribe. So you can both report on how many people unsubscribe from a given sendout, and also make sure that your that your status on all subscribers list is accurate. So if we go back to our cloud page here, that's basically it. So if we just simply have a look here in our data model. So right now I've cleared my contacts, it's empty. I cleared my consents, it's empty as well. So let's see what happens if we trigger a sign up here. So let's make sure that I enable my header. I did, and let's call this one. Yeah. So I have some logging here I need to disable, but you can see now I created the contact and consent, and I have a DOI required. So let me just quickly check my inbox and see if there is any email that has come back, has arrived. Yes. So here, 0 minutes ago, I received double opt-in confirmation is required. It's a very simple email, I admit, but the point is, if you look in the data model, there's a consent here, and it has email consent set to true. This is my contact ID. I came in from this sign up form. This is my email, but I have double opt-in pending. Okay, what can we do about it? Well, if it was, we will not go into details on building cloud pages. I believe everyone here knows it. But what you then can do is you can take this call that actually is pushing to the same URL, to the same custom, to the same custom endpoint, and you can take this consent ID that we have here. You can populate this into our request, and you can send. This says consent updated. So this call would be built between your double opt-in confirmation page and this custom API. So if we go back to our data model, let's update this and see how it looks. Double opt-in pending is set to false, which means that now we can, continue sending out messages to this person because we both have an email consent, and double opt-in pending is no longer true. But what did just happen when I did this this kind of strange payload, which is basically very minimal payload to the same endpoint? Well, if we look back to this one here, it's basically this part here. If consent ID exists in my payload, which it will normally not do, because then my consent ID is not known if I just do regular sign up. It's only when I have this call to confirm a double opt-in that I will include consent ID in my payload. So if it's present, I'll go in and update my consents, where I will look for this ID and set the double opt-in pending to false, and basically just print consent updated. So this is this is basically what will happen here. In another case, let's just do a post over here. If I say, well, I want to sign up to something in Sweden, double opt-in is not required, and I want, of course, to set everything to true. And then you can see it says contact updated, because we keep the same contact ID, same subscriber key, but then it says consent created, because previously we only had a consent for Denmark. Now we also have a consent for Sweden. Let's go back to our data model and see what we have in our consents data extension. See, we have Denmark and Sweden, two different IDs, but the same contact ID. And because I didn't set the double opt-in pending for Sweden to true, because I didn't set double opt-in required to true, I have double opt-in pending set to false over here. And if we go back to our trigger config, there is nothing in Sweden, because we have signed up for SE and locale Sweden. There is nothing that will be triggered. But let's just, for one more time, go back and trigger something for Denmark. So if you say DK, double opt-in required as false, set email to true. So you can now see I have contact updated and consent updated, because both records already existed in my data model. Let me quickly check my inbox. And now I received kind of it's again a test email, but you can see received 0 minutes ago, my font test hello world, which just came out of my my journey builder over here. So again, it's really real time, and it's really easy to map. If your business stakeholders, if your marketeers say, we need to be able to trigger journeys real time with arbitrary content from whatever landing page we configure, you can do it without having to change any code. You just use your configuration data extension. So if you go into welcome one, you'll be able to see that this is the one we just sent, and whatever is set to 234. And I can literally just add another attribute here, which says SSJS, and immediately I can go into my payload and say SSJS is just awesome. Let me just check this. Normally it can take forever, as you know. Contact builder is not the fastest friend in school. But let's see, maybe emails. Yeah, okay, now we have this. So let's just do it once again. Okay, this looks correct. Let's go back to our welcome data extension. Let's see. Yeah, SSJS is just awesome. So again, I think this is super fantastic because you don't have to change anything in your consent management. It will just proxy this all the way through to the particular journey. You don't have to care. And speaking of this payload, let's just go back and look at our sign-up log. And this is, again, super nice because we have our GUI that's just basically the unique identifier of this event. We have our payload, and you can see earlier I was just sending whatever, and now I'm sending SSJS is just awesome. We have exactly the same payload as we fired up in Postman. We have this in our log, and we have the ID of the contact to which this this event corresponds. This is obviously a data extension that you can do a data retention policy on for like 7 days, 30 days, or whatever, because you don't need this for that long. You basically just need this shortly after an issue has occurred. You need to validate, okay, did we actually send or did we actually receive the right payload? If there are some issues that, let's say you added that additional field that's called SSJS, but it's not being populated. Here you can check, okay, did I even receive this from whoever is sending me these API calls? Anything else? Yeah, and sign up log, as I said, it's kind of a, no, sorry, sign up sources. This is basically just to keep track on, you know, what contact ID, when was it created, from which locale, which form. And this is something that I use to do some analysis, saying if we are doing some prize draw and say everyone who signs up to our competition can win a free Salesforce t-shirt, then I want to make sure whoever signed up on that campaign will be in sign-up sources, even though their sign-up source might be overwritten on their contact, because since back then they signed up on yet another campaign. Yeah, I think we have 8 minutes left, so I don't know, it might be a good time to open up for some questions. There's something in the chat I can see. Delete consent function. Do I have a delete consent function anywhere? I don't think I have a delete consent function. Do I? Kian, can you be more specific what you mean with delete consent? Because if this is more about the, okay, I think it's more about the delete that we have in our, this one here, yes. So the reason, I'm assuming this is the one, otherwise please write in the chat if it's not. So this one, it basically, okay, because the payload for triggering a journey or transactional send must be flat. So again, all this data needs to be in one level. I cannot have nested JSON like this one. So I can't have consents and then yet another level with few fields and values. Everything needs to be flat. And since we don't have anything to use this consents for, I'm basically removing it from this payload that I'm receiving. and I'm sending the rest as parameters to Journey Builder. So this is why I can do this highly flexible, because in one command on one line, I can just remove everything here. I know that when I have reached that step in my code, I'm eligible to send out this email, because we already here in our cloud page do a check saying, okay, do we have an email consent for this guy? Yes, we have. And we don't require double opt-in? No, we don't. Well, let's send it out. So basically down here, I don't care about consents. And if I did, you can still do, a contact filter on your Journey Builder to look at the consents data extension to see, okay, if my journey both consists of emails and SMS, then you might be able to check in a decision split, do I have consent for email or do I also have consent for SMS? You can do it there. Okay, regarding contact data model, for same contact who log in consent from different locale, different contact ID, but same email address will be created. No, well, if I sign up from a different locale, we will still have the same contact ID, because if you look at my context data extension, which is here, you can see I have one record and one record only. And this is my subscriber key, this is my contact ID. If you look at my consents data extension, you'll see there are two records and both have the same contact ID. So we have one for Denmark and one for Sweden. And I can basically, I can just say, I'm super tired of receiving all that Swedish newsletters. Then I can unsubscribe from email consent, SMS consent for Sweden, while I'm still receiving email and SMS for Denmark for the same subscriber key. So, and this is the reason for why all subscribers is not that good, because right now here I am in I would probably unsubscribe if I unsubscribe from Sweden and log unsubscribe event. Even though I was subscribed in Denmark, I will not receive any Danish commercial emails because they will be blocked by my status in all subscribers list. And this is why I only rely on these data extensions here when building my segments. Okay, when you check if journey, you're welcome, Ken. Camila, when you check if journey, are you referring to transactional journey you should or another ordinary journey? So, good question. In Journey Builder, you can, as you know, create new journey. Multi-step journey, single send, we don't talk about that, but multi-step or transactional. Multi-step, that's the good old friend that we have seen for many years. You can use it as a data extension, you can use it as a welcome journey, birthday journey, whatever journey. Here, if I have the API event, this is where I define my, my key that I use in my trigger config. So for example, if I was to do one for Sweden, I'll say sign up from SE. I'll need to do welcome Sweden. Then I will create a new journey where I have an API event that I create that's called, just use the same data extension and call it welcome one. And say this is called Sweden welcome. Done. Can I change the Event definition key. Yeah, then I can put this event definition key in my, in this one here, and basically update this and say, this is the trigger event that I need to call. And then I can trigger the journey, which is this one, with this payload, with this endpoint. Because if this is not a journey, but let's just abandon this one. If it's not a journey, but it's this transactional send, I can then just say, well, it's just one email and it's a transactional one. I need to have, see this here, I can actually define this as welcome underscore Sweden. Here I need to post a different payload to a different endpoint. So in order to be flexible and say, because the transactional API event, it's significantly quicker in sending out email to you than the old journey builder. But the journey builder has all these other advantages that you can do cross-channel decision splits, wait steps, blah, blah, blah. So this is why we are doing this. This validation is trigger a journey or not, which is something you define in your trigger config. Yeah, it's this one here. Cool. Oh yeah, Christian. Because has multiple email addresses. Yes. Well, it again. I'll bring my favorite consultancy answer. It depends. So when you have different email addresses, let me just show you here. So I want to sign up with Lunow plus 123. So contact created. So now I'm the same guy. We have no ability to add another email address to the same subscriber key. If this email address does not exist in our context data extension, sorry, then we just create a new record, which is just what arrived here. So performing a loop probably everyone is able to see what is in the chat, but Christian is asking, should we do a loop to handle all instances of the same email address? Well, you will not have to, because if you have one email address, because we're doing this lookup over here on our context data extension, when we are receiving the payload, we will always find you in the context data extension and use the ID from the row that your email exists on. So we will never have a case where we have one email address that is basically present in multiple records for different for different concept IDs. I don't know if Christian, is that does it explain this? Okay, great, thanks. Another thing that I did not cover here is if you want to do a full unsubscribe, because again, this shit can go, super crazy. I can say, hey, I want to get things from France. I want to get things from India. I want to get things from Canada. I just love newsletters. So imagine that you now have still only 2 contacts, but suddenly you have a lot of consents. So you might want to do a function that is just like a kill all. And because it's super annoying to unsubscribe newsletter by newsletter by newsletter. What you could do is I want to do a full unsubscribe. So basically what it needs to do is to say, well, find all the consents that belong to the same contact ID, like these 4 in our case, and just set everything to false. That will be, my recommendation if you want to do something that iterates through multiple records. Any more questions to the code, the data model, anything? Yeah. If not, let me just, sorry.
Oh, that's really wonderful, Lucas, and I really appreciate you explaining in detail all the questions. So that's really awesome. I don't see any other questions, so we're
Okay.
all.
Yeah, because and then I have just one last or a few last slides here. So additional ideas. Processing list unsubscribes is something that we didn't touch upon, but as you know, if I'm sending out a commercial email, let me just see if I can find it here on my laptop. So if I'm sending out a commercial email, what can happen sometimes is that I'm having it will not have sometimes you have that unsubscribe header that says this email came from a mailing list. Do you want to unsubscribe? That's kind of a behind the scenes unsubscribe, which is something that comes in and sends an unsubscribe into Marketing Cloud. This is basically the log unsubscribe event. You might want to collect it, and you might want to remove the unsubscribe status from all subscribers. Instead, go in and unsubscribe things in your want to unsubscribe things in your data model instead. Right now, we don't have an update email address. So if you want, you can only sign up and update things based on your email address. What you could consider is to do a process where you can log in, or you can click on a cloud page, and we can look you up based on your subscriber key. Then you can update your email address in the context data extension. Right now, it's not possible. If you really insist, yes, we've been through this a number of times, all subscribers, keep it in sync with data model if you can, if you are not supporting 58 different countries, which all have different consents. We can cache API token locally. This is for triggering the emails and journeys. The API token is something that, each time, I can just quickly show it to you. Each time you have this API call here that is asking to send a journey or send out a trigger, first we call the v2 token authentication URL with client ID and client secret. We get the token back, and then we perform the call to either trigger a journey or trigger transactional email. But it's not necessary, because the lifetime of a token that we are getting back in this call is 20 minutes. So instead of sending a request once every time you call this function, store the token in a data extension, and before you do this call, check in the data extension if the token is still valid. If it's still valid, use the token and append it to your actual API trigger call. If it's not valid because it's more than 20 minutes since it got generated, then let's just do this authentication call with client ID and client secret, and call it. Get the token back, store it in the data extension, and update its expiry date. Last but not least, remove credentials from cloud resource. Sorry. As you saw, and I will remove that package when we're done. As you saw, you have the client ID and client secret in plain text. what you could do is you can use encrypt and decrypt symmetric to not store these in plain text in your code resource, but store them somewhere else. I have a few references here. We have a blog post with complete code. And then I have, storing token locally in data extension. This is not my article. It's from Ivan Rosin that actually explains, how you can work with this, how you can store this locally in a data extension. So again, encrypt and decrypt symmetric. Again, a quite interesting one because it allows you to actually not have this running in plain text in your source code for your code resource. Any final remarks?
This is all good, Lucas. Extremely good. I don't see any other questions, but this session is very informative. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And happy to be able to share this with you. And as I mentioned, the code is on my blog. The same is the package for the package manager, so you can deploy your data extensions. If there are any issues, well, I think there's a link on the in my presentation to my blog. You can also catch me on How to SFMC Slack, also on Safe for Stack Exchange, on Trailblazer community. Basically, I'm checking all these on a daily basis. So usually you should be able to get a response within 24 hours.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Lucas. I'll be sharing the recording soon along with your slide deck and all the links to the resources that you have shared. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. You're welcome. And thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks everyone. And we'll see you tomorrow, 8 a.m. for the hands-on session. If not, next week, the same time for the SSJS session with Michelle. So please be sure to register and join. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.